Wyoming Territory, November. The mountains above the valley have turned white, and below them where the road meets a small town, dust rises from a stagecoach that is finally, after 6 months of Thursdays here. A man stands at the edge of the road with his hat in his hands. He has been waiting for a very long time. The door opens. Passengers step down. One, then another, then the last one. She is not wearing blue. Her dress is the color of hard miles. Her shawl more gaps than cloth. Her boots do not match. She has nothing left except a name she built herself and 2 hands that still work. Already she does not look away, not once. The stagecoach was 40 minutes late. Cole Tanner had been standing at the edge of the road since noon with his hat in his hands and the particular stillness of a man who had learned that patience was not a virtue. It was a survival skill. Stone Creek Ranch stretched behind him, 300 acres of Wyoming territory that his father had broken his hands on and his mother had watered with things harder than tears. The white fences, the 2-story house with the wide porch that faced west, the barn that listed slightly southward because his brother Ben had helped build it, and Ben had never been able to hold a level straight. He had written the advertisement in February. Rancher, widower, 2 daughters, honest work, honest man, looking for a partner, not a portrait. He had received 11 letters. He had answered 1. Ruth Calloway of Cincinnati, Ohio, who wrote without flattery and without apology, who said she could cook and mend and manage a household and care for children, and that she expected nothing more than fairness and a roof that did not leak, who signed her letter not with flourishes, but with 2 plain words, Ruth Calloway, as if her name was already enough, and she knew it. He had written back. She had written back again. By the time April came, he had read her letters enough times that he knew which sentences she had written quickly and which ones she had written slowly. He could tell by the pressure of the pen. The stagecoach arrived in a cloud of red dust. Cole straightened. Ben appeared from nowhere, the way Ben always appeared, suddenly and with opinions already formed. "She'll be the one in blue," Ben said. "You told her to wear something blue." "I did. So look for blue." "I know what I told her, Ben." The driver climbed down, then an older man with a crate, then a woman with a child on her hip who was not getting off here, then nobody. The door hung open, dust settled, the horses stamped, and then a hand appeared on the frame, a grip that held longer than it should have, and then a woman pulled herself down onto the road and stood there with her legs, taking a moment to remember what solid ground felt like. She was not wearing blue. She was wearing whatever she had been wearing when someone had taken everything else. The dress was brown calico once. Now it was the color of a road and a hard week. A shawl that was more gaps than cloth. Her hair half pinned and half escaped. Her face the particular shade of a person who had been traveling in the wrong direction of food and water for more days than was dignified. Ben made a sound beside him, not a word, just a sound. Cole did not make a sound. He looked at her. She was already looking at him, not the way someone looked at a stranger, the way someone looked at a known address they had been trying to reach for a long time and were not sure whether to be relieved or terrified that they had finally arrived. She crossed the road toward him. Her boots were mismatched. He could see that from 15 feet away, one was slightly shorter than the other. "Mr. Tanner," she said. Her voice was dry from the road, still steady. "Miss Calloway," he said. She reached into the fold of her shawl and produced an envelope, the same envelope he had sent her 3 months ago, his own handwriting on the front. She held it out like proof of something. He took it, did not open it. He had written the words himself. I was robbed, she said, flat, honest, no theater to it. Outside of Cheyenne, 2 men. They took my trunk and the smaller bag. I kept the letters because they were inside my dress. Are you hurt? No, just missing most of what I owned. Ben said, Where's your documentation? She looked at Ben for the first time. In the smaller bag, she said, with the men from Cheyenne. Ben looked at Cole. Cole looked at the envelope in his hand. She's got no papers, Ben said. Low meant only for Cole. No reference, no documentation, could be anyone. Cole looked at her again. She was standing with both feet flat on the ground and her chin level and her hands very still at her sides. The shawl was ridiculous. The boots were wrong. She had nothing, and she was standing the way a person stood when they had decided that standing was the only thing left available to them, and they were going to do it well. You wrote, he said, that you don't scare easy. I don't. Prove it's you. She thought about this for exactly 1 second. Then she said, in my 3rd letter, I told you the name of the book my grandmother read to me every Sunday. You asked in your 2nd letter what I missed most about Cincinnati. I said I didn't miss Cincinnati. I said I missed Sunday mornings. He had asked that question. He remembered her answer. What book? He said. Psalms, she said. My grandmother had a voice like river water, and she never needed to read the whole page. She said the best words were the ones you already knew by heart. He had not written that in any letter. She had not written it either. It had come from somewhere else, somewhere that had nothing to do with documentation. All right, Cole said. Ben made a different sound this time. Cole ignored it. All right, he said again. To her, let's go. Dora Buell was standing on the porch when they came up the road. She had been running the house at Stone Creek Ranch for 4 years since Margaret got sick and then sicker and then gone. She was 60 years old with hands that looked like they had been working since she was 7. She watched Ruth Calloway climb down from the wagon with the expression of a woman taking inventory. Not unkind, not warm either, just looking. You look like something the road spat out, Dora said. I am, Ruth said. Is there water? Dora blinked. People usually argued with her. Kitchen, she said, and stepped aside. Inside the house smelled like beeswax and something older underneath. Margaret's smell, Cole sometimes thought. The house had kept it even after everything else changed. Ruth followed Dora down the hall, and Cole went to find Ezra, because there was always something to find Ezra about. Ezra Finch was in the barn, where Ezra always was. He was 55 years old and had been on this ranch since Cole's father ran it, and he had developed over 2 decades the specific talent of being wherever the work was before anyone else knew the work needed doing. He looked up when Cole came in. Stage came, Cole said. I know, Ezra said. He was mending a harness with the focused attention he gave everything. How is she? Robbed on the road. No luggage. Ezra nodded, like this was not surprising, like this was just weather. Ben's upset, Cole said. Ben's always upset, Ezra said, which was true. In the kitchen, Dora had set a cup on the table, and Ruth was drinking from it, with both hands wrapped around it, the way you drank when the warmth was as important as the water. She looked up when Cole came in. The room, Dora said, without turning from the stove. End of the upstairs hall, small, clean, window that faces the east field. Thank you, Ruth said. Don't thank me yet, Dora said. Thank me when you know what you're staying for. Ruth set the cup down, and that was when the door to the kitchen opened, small feet first, a rush of blonde curls, 5 years old and already in motion before she was fully through the door. Lily Tanner hit the kitchen at full speed, stopped 3 feet from Ruth, and looked at her with the absolute directness of a child who had not yet learned to pretend. Ruth looked back. Lily said, "You have 2 different boots." "I do," Ruth said. "Why?" "Because I only had 2 boots to choose from, and they didn't match." Lily considered this with the seriousness of a scholar. "Mine match," she said. "I can see that. They're very good boots." Lily looked at them, then back at Ruth. Then she walked forward and put her hand on Ruth's knee, just rested it there, like she was checking something. Ruth did not move. Lily said, "You smell like the road." "I do." "Papa smells like horses. Dora smells like soap. Sadie smells like ink." "What does Lily smell like?" Ruth said. The girl thought about this very carefully. "Peaches," she said, "usually," and then she pulled her hand back and sat down cross-legged on the kitchen floor next to Ruth's chair and began explaining something about a wooden horse she had lost under the porch. Ruth listened. The whole time, Dora watched Ruth listen and said nothing. Sadie came later. She came the way Sadie did, everything which was with information already gathered and a verdict already forming. She was 9 years old with dark braids and the eyes of someone who had been keeping count for years. She stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at Ruth the way a judge looked at something presented as evidence. "You're the one," Sadie said. "I am," Ruth said. "You're late. The stagecoach was late. Papa's advertisement said October. It's November." "The stagecoach was late," Ruth said again, mild, consistent. Sadie crossed her arms. "The last one left after 6 days. I heard. She cried when she packed. She just kept saying she was sorry, all the way to the gate. A beat. We didn't ask her to be sorry. We just wanted her to stay." Ruth said nothing, which was the right answer. Sadie studied her for another moment. "You have mismatched boots," she said. Lily already noted that. Lily notes everything eventually, but she forgets it by morning. Sadie tilted her head. "I don't forget things." "Good to know." Another silence. Sadie's jaw moved like she was chewing something that wouldn't soften. "If you're going to go," she said finally, "go before Lily gets attached." "And if I'm not going," Sadie looked at her. "Then prove it," she said, and went upstairs. The room at the end of the hall was small. A cot, a wash basin, a dresser with peeling paint that someone had tried to repaint once and given up halfway. A window that faced the east field where the first light came in thin and early. Ruth sat on the edge of the cot, the quilt folded under her like something that had been patient a long time. She thought about Lily's hand on her knee. She thought, "Don't." She thought, "I know." But she thought, "You have been wrong about safe places before. You have unpacked your bags before. You have thought before that this time something would hold, and then it didn't hold, and you were the one who had to gather everything back up and keep walking." She thought, "Stop." She listened to the house, the creak of floorboards, Dora moving in the kitchen below, a door somewhere, wind through the east field coming in at the bottom of the window where the seal wasn't perfect, and Lily's voice from down the hall already telling someone about the peach smell. Ruth lay back on the cot with her arms at her sides and stared at the ceiling and said nothing out loud at all. She woke before anyone else, which was not unusual. She had been waking before anyone else for years. Her body had learned to read a house in the dark, the way you learn to read a road, where the soft spots were, where the sound carried, where to step and where not to. She dressed in the same dress. It was all she had. The kitchen was cool and dark. She found the stove without a lamp because the layout was sensible and she had already memorized it the evening before. She found the wood. She found the matches. She built the fire the way her grandmother had taught her, which was with patience and very small pieces first. Dora found her at 5:30 with the coffee already made and the bread already rising. She stood in the doorway for a moment. Then she came in and sat at the kitchen table without a word and held out her cup. Ruth poured. They sat in the pre-dawn quiet of the kitchen and did not speak for a full 10 minutes. It was the kind of silence that had to be earned. Ruth did not try to earn it. She just worked in it, and Dora let her. Finally, Dora said, "The last woman Hester brought in couldn't cook." "Who's Hester?" "Placement agency in Cheyenne. Sent 3 women over 2 years." She turned the cup. "First one was lovely, lasted 8 days. Second one was practical, lasted 6. Third one was Willa." A pause. "Left crying." "I know," Ruth said. "Sadie told me." Dora looked at her. "What exactly did Sadie tell you?" "That she cried all the way to the gate, and they didn't ask her to." Dora was quiet. "That child," she said finally, not unkindly, just as a fact. "She's protecting them," Ruth said. "Both of them. She's been doing it for a long time. She's been doing it since Margaret died," Dora said, "which was 2 years ago last January, and she was 7 years old when it happened, and she put on her best dress for the funeral and held Lily's hand the entire time, and I didn't once see her face break." She paused. "That worried me more than the crying would have." Ruth thought about a 7-year-old in her best dress holding her sister's hand, not breaking. She thought, "I know that strength. I know what it costs later." She turned back to the bread. Ben came to breakfast with the expression of a man who had slept badly on a decision he hadn't made yet. He sat down, accepted the coffee Ruth set in front of him without asking, looked at it. "You can't cook bad food and call it the road's fault," he said. Ruth put a plate in front of him. He looked at the eggs, the biscuits, the sliced apples. "I'm not saying you're what you say you are," he said. "You don't have to," Ruth said. "I'm saying Cole is trusting. He's always been trusting. Our father used to say Cole would give a man his last dollar if the man looked at him right. And did your father think that was a fault?" Ben ate a biscuit, chewed it. The chewing answered nothing, but the slight relaxation in his shoulders answered something. "No," he said. "He said it made Cole the better man. He just said someone needed to watch Cole's back while he was being better." He looked at her. "That's me, and I'm watching." "Fair enough," Ruth said, and she went to refill his coffee without being asked. Cole came down last, freshly shaved, his shirt rolled to the elbows the way men rolled their sleeves when they meant to work hard all day. He sat at the head of the table and looked at the food and looked at his daughters and said, "This looks good." "Miss Ruth made it," Lily said. "She was up before the chickens." "Before the chickens," Cole said. He looked at Ruth. She looked back. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," he said. Ezra appeared at the back door at the exact moment the last biscuit left the pan. He ate standing up, as was apparently his custom, and said nothing to anyone, which was apparently also his custom. Ruth handed him the biscuit without being asked. He took it without ceremony. He looked at her once over the rim of his cup. She looked back. He nodded, which was, she would later understand, the most a man like Ezra Finch ever volunteered. 3 days passed. Ruth worked. The house was not a hard house to work in once you understood its logic. The kitchen wanted to be used. The floors wanted to be clean. The shelves along the south wall wanted books in them in the right order. She found the order on the second day. Margaret had organized them by color of spine and then by title within each color. It was not the conventional method, but it was the method of someone who had strong opinions and the patience to act on them. Ruth found herself respecting Margaret without having known her. Lily followed Ruth from room to room like a small and purposeful shadow. She explained things as she went, the name of each horse, the crack in the plaster that Ezra kept patching and that kept returning, the reason the third stair from the bottom creaked louder than the others. Sadie stands on it on purpose, Lily said, to warn people. Warn them of what? That she's coming. Lily considered this. Or that she already came and went. She does both. Sadie herself kept her distance, not rudely, not warmly, the distance of someone doing a careful calculation and unwilling to share the preliminary numbers. On the third day, she tested Ruth with the fractions, spread her schoolwork on the kitchen table while Ruth was doing the accounts Cole had asked her to review, slid the book over without a word, looked at her. Ruth looked at the fractions. They were not simple. They were the kind of fractions that would tell you whether someone knew the subject or had merely memorized a method. She picked up the pencil, worked through 2 of them, slid the book back. Sadie looked. Her eyes narrowed. "You went faster than Miss Adelaide," she said. "Who is Miss Adelaide?" "The governess. She's away." A pause. She said long division took patience. "It takes pattern recognition," Ruth said. "There's a difference." Sadie looked at the fractions, looked at Ruth. "Show me," she said. Not please, just the word, but the word itself was a different kind of test. Ruth showed her. That evening, Sadie left her workbook on the kitchen chair. Ruth found it when she went to set the table for dinner. She picked it up, carried it upstairs, set it outside Sadie's door. In the morning, it was gone. No thank you, but it was gone. And at breakfast, Sadie sat close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Almost. Not quite, but almost. On the 4th day, Ruth cleaned the library. It was a small room at the back of the house, lined with shelves, a writing desk in the corner, a reading chair that faced the window overlooking the pasture, dust on every surface, not the dust of neglect, the dust of a room people had been staying out of. She understood that kind of room. She worked slowly, moving through the shelves the way you moved through something that belonged to someone else, with respect, reading spines, wiping covers, Margaret's collection, Pride and Prejudice, the Bible with its spine broken from use, a worn copy of Jane Eyre with the margins full of notes in a small, precise hand. She opened the Jane Eyre. She read a margin note. She read another. And then she opened the writing desk to find a cloth to wipe it down. And at the back of the bottom drawer, behind a false panel that had warped enough to be visible to someone paying attention, her fingers found paper, folded, yellowed at the edges, tucked there with the care of something you were not ready to destroy but could not leave in the open. She pulled it out. She held it for a moment without opening it. The handwriting on the outside was not addressed to anyone, just a fold, just a seal broken long ago by Margaret herself, already read or never sent. She could not tell which. She opened it. The handwriting inside was the same as the margins in the Jane Eyre, small, precise, the hand of someone who thought carefully before committing words. Cole. She stopped, looked at the hallway. Empty, continued reading. The letter was not long, but it was the weight of something long. Margaret had known for some time that she was sick, had known longer than she let Cole know, had made peace with it in the way of a person who made peace quietly rather than loudly because the people around her had enough to carry. But there was something else. He came back. Ruth's breath caught. She read it again. He came back. I told him to leave. I begged him, but I never told you he showed up at all. I thought keeping it from you would protect the girls, protect our home. I was wrong. He said he would return. And then the last lines. If you find this, whoever you are, it means the house chose you to find it. And what I need from you is not perfection. I need you to stand in the place I left empty, not because you owe it, because someone has to, and because you walked into this house when you had nothing left, which means you understand what it means to stand in a place anyway. Ruth read it twice more. The letter shook slightly in her hands, not because it was addressed to her, because it wasn't addressed to anyone. It was addressed to whoever came after. It was the letter of a woman who knew she would not get to choose her own replacement, and so instead she left instructions for whoever the house found worthy of finding them. She folded the letter, put it in her apron pocket, went back to dusting. When Dora appeared in the doorway 40 minutes later, Ruth was on the second shelf from the top with a cloth. Dora looked at her. Ruth looked at Dora. The bottom drawer of the desk, Ruth said, has a warped panel. Dora looked at the desk. I know, she said. Have you read it? A pause. Yes. How long ago? 6 months after she died, when I was looking for the receipt for the winter feed order. Dora did not move from the doorway. I put it back because I didn't know what to do with it, and because it wasn't mine to decide what came next. Ruth put the cloth down. He came back, she said. Whoever he is. She was afraid. Yes, Dora said. Do you know who? Dora looked at the floor, then at Ruth, the look of someone who had been carrying something that was not hers to carry, and was tired of carrying it alone. No, she said, but I know what she was afraid of, and I know that she was right to be afraid. She paused. And I know that whatever is coming, it was going to come whether you were here or not. But now you are here. She said it like a fact, not a comfort, just a fact. Ruth took the letter out of her pocket, held it for a moment. Then she put it in the drawer of the writing desk where it had been, not because she wanted to leave it there, because she needed to tell Cole first, and she needed to do that right. That evening, after the girls were in bed and Dora had retired and Ezra had gone to the bunkhouse and Ben had taken himself off somewhere, Ruth found Cole on the porch. He was standing with his forearms on the railing, looking at the east field where the last of the light was pulling away. A man thinking or trying not to. She stood in the doorway. He looked over his shoulder. You don't have to stay out here, he said. It's your house too, for now. She came out, stood beside him. They looked at the field. I've been watching you, he said, not as an accusation, as a fact, since you came. I know, she said, the way you are with them, with Lily, even with Sadie, who is not easy. He was quiet for a moment. She tested you with the fractions. She passed, Ruth said. Something in him shifted, almost like a laugh, but quieter. My wife, he said, used to say that Sadie came out of the womb already grading people on a scale she hadn't told anyone about. Said the only passing grade was honesty. He looked at the field, said you could lie to Sadie once and she would never forget it. But if you told her the truth even about something hard, she would remember that too. Ruth said nothing. I'm not asking you to be their mother, Cole said. He turned to look at her. The light was going, just enough left to see his face, the lines around his eyes that came from working outside and from something else too. Margaret was their mother. She will always be their mother, and I will never try to replace what that means. But, he stopped, exhaled. I've watched you for 4 days, and I've watched Lily follow you, and I've watched Sadie leave her workbook for you to find. And I have to ask you something honestly, because that is the only way I know to ask things." He looked at her. "Can you be the person who doesn't leave when it gets hard?" Ruth held his gaze. She thought about Kansas. She thought about the night she left with nothing. She thought about every door she had stood in front of, and every road she had walked down, and every time she had told herself that the next place would be different. "Yes," she said. He nodded once, like he had believed it before she said it, and was now simply confirming it. "Then," he said, "will you be the mother my girls need?" The question was not large. He said it quietly, the way you said something you had been thinking about for a long time and were finally saying out loud. Ruth looked at the east field in the last of the light. She thought about Lily's hand on her knee. She thought about Sadie standing in the doorway with her arms crossed and her jaw set and her heart doing exactly what she was trying to prevent it from doing. She thought about the letter in the writing desk. She thought about a woman she had never met who had left something for whoever the house found. "Yes," Ruth said. Cole looked at the field, and for the first time since Ruth Calloway had arrived at Stone Creek Ranch with mismatched boots and nothing else, the porch felt like it belonged to something that was going to keep standing. The aspens along the creek road were losing the last of their leaves. The October wind moved through them in long, deliberate passes, and Stone Creek Ranch settled into the stillness of a place that is deciding whether to trust the quiet or prepare for what comes next. Inside, in the room at the end of the upstairs hall, Ruth Calloway lay on the cot and listened to the house breathe around her. She thought about the letter in the writing desk. She thought Margaret was afraid of someone. She thought, and whatever she was afraid of, he said he would return. She thought, stop. She thought, I know. But this time I am not alone in the house. Outside, the last light left the east field, and in the writing desk in the library, a letter waited, patient as a river waiting for spring. 2 weeks. That was how long it took for Stone Creek Ranch to stop feeling temporary, not safe. Ruth did not trust safe, but something closer to bearable, something that could be stayed in. She had learned the order of the mornings, the way Lily's feet sounded before the rest of her appeared, the specific creak of Cole's boots on the third stair, slower going down than going up, the way Dora set things in patterns of 3, always 3, as if the number had some private meaning. She had learned that Ezra fixed the most important things last, letting the small breakages accumulate until he could repair them all in one day of steady, silent work. She had learned that Ben drank his coffee the same way he held his opinions, black and without apology. She had learned that Sadie kept a journal, not secretly, just privately. She carried it everywhere and wrote in it with a seriousness that belonged to someone 20 years older, and she never explained what she was writing and nobody asked, and that arrangement appeared to satisfy everyone. She had learned that Lily had a specific hierarchy of cuddles that ranked animals first, then people, then objects, with the notable exception of her porcelain doll, which functioned in a category entirely its own. Ruth had learned the house. The house she felt was learning her back, which was why the morning Drake Kane rode through the east gate felt wrong in the way that things felt wrong when you had just started to believe they might be right. She was on the porch with Lily and a basket of mending when she heard the hoofbeats. The ranch dogs did not bark, which was the first wrong thing. The dogs barked at everything except the things they recognized. A man on a gray horse came through at a walk, well dressed in the way that required maintenance, a coat the color of good leather, a hat that fit correctly. everything about him communicating that he belonged to a world where things were measured and arranged and held to account. He stopped his horse at the middle of the yard and looked at the house, and then he looked at the porch, and then he looked at Ruth. She had not moved, could not for a moment, because the specific calculation her body was doing had frozen every voluntary system while it ran the numbers. A man, 60 pounds of additional weight and a full gray beard over the last 13 years, but the eyes the same, the way he held his head the same, the deliberateness of every movement as if he had decided ahead of time how each limb would travel and followed the plan precisely. She knew those eyes. The last time she had seen them, they had been looking down at her from a bench in a Cheyenne courthouse, and they had been saying in the tone of a man reading a sentence he had already decided, "The charges against Lorna Hale are dismissed for insufficient evidence. You are free to go, Miss Hale." Lorna Hale, her name then, not her name anymore. She had changed it when she changed everything else, when she left Cheyenne with nothing and started the long work of becoming someone who might deserve a future. Drake Kane, still studying her, she put the mending in the basket. She stood. She did not flinch. Cole came around the side of the barn. He had seen the horse from the field. His face was already doing the thing it did when something required management, not anger, just readiness. "Drake," he said. "Cole." Kane dismounted with the ease of someone who knew every horse on this ranch and had at some point made his calculations about all of them. "Been too long." "Hasn't been long enough," Cole said, which was honest and also the kind of thing a person said when they were not yet ready to have the real conversation. Drake smiled, the smile of a man who did not need to hurry. "Just passing through the county," he said. "Thought I'd stop in, pay my respects, see how the place is holding." His eyes moved to the porch again, to Ruth. "See what's new." Cole's voice was steady. "This is Miss Calloway. She's helping with the house." "Is she?" Drake said. Ruth looked at him. He looked at her. The recognition between them was not a question. It was a period at the end of a sentence both of them had been waiting to say. "Mr. Kane," she said. "Miss Calloway," he said. And the way he said it, the slight weight on the second syllable, the smallest pause before the last name, told her everything she needed to know about what came next. Lily tugged at Ruth's skirt from behind. "He has cold eyes," she whispered, very seriously, as if this were a diagnosis. "Hush," Ruth said quietly. Drake stayed for coffee he did not drink. He sat in the parlor with Cole and talked about the land to the west of the creek and the water rights along the northern fence and the survey from 1871 that he had always thought was imprecise. Cole answered every question with the economy of a man who had been answering the same questions for years and found them no more interesting the 10th time than the first. Ruth stayed in the kitchen. She listened, not to the words. She already knew the shape of the words, to the underneath of them, the pacing, the way Drake Kane was letting Cole know that something was coming without saying it directly, the way a man might run his finger along the edge of a blade without cutting himself just to show you the blade was there. She had been in enough courtrooms to know that method. Dora came to stand beside her at the window. Neither of them spoke. When Drake left, he said goodbye to Cole and nodded to Ben, who had appeared from the bunkhouse, with the expression he wore for everything he distrusted, which encompassed most things. He collected his horse, mounted with the same precise economy as before, and at the gate he stopped, and he looked back, not at the house, at the porch where Ruth was now standing. He looked at her for 3 full seconds, Then he rode away. That night, after the girls were in bed and Dora had retired and Ezra had gone to his usual place, and Ben was sitting at the kitchen table with his arms crossed and his coffee gone cold, Cole came to find Ruth. She was in the library. She had been expecting this. She had the letter from Margaret in her hands, not reading it, just holding it. "You know him," Cole said, not a question. "Yes." "From where?" She looked up. She had been deciding how to say this for the last 6 hours, and what she had decided was that there was only one way, and it was the direct way, and the direct way was the only way that had ever worked in her life when it worked at all. "His name is Drake Kane," she said, "and the last time I saw him, he was the judge presiding over the case against me in Cheyenne." Cole said nothing. "I was 19 years old," she said. "I had a husband. His name was not important because he was not what he said he was, and I was young enough and desperate enough not to see it until too late." She folded her hands in her lap. "He ran confident schemes. He used me as the front, the friendly face, the woman who met the mark first and made him comfortable. I didn't know that was what I was doing the first time. By the second time I knew, but I was also afraid." She looked at the window. "By the third time, I had a son who was 2 years old, and I knew exactly what was happening, and I was terrified, and I stayed anyway because I didn't know how to leave and stay alive." Cole had not moved. "The case went to court," she said. "Drake Kane dismissed the charges against me for insufficient evidence. He was correct. I had not knowingly committed fraud after the first time, but the record exists. Accessory to fraud. The name on the record is Lorna Hale because that was my name then." She looked at Cole. "I changed my name when I left Cheyenne, legally. Everything I told you about myself is true. Everything in my letters is true. The name changed. Nothing else did." The fire in the small grate did its work. Cole looked at her for a long time. Then he said, "Where is the husband now?" "I don't know. I stopped knowing in 1864. "And your son?" The word hit her somewhere below the sternum. "He died," she said. "I was told he died. The fever. I was not with him when it happened." She stopped. "I was not with him because the situation at that time made it not safe for him to be with me. He was in the care of someone I trusted." She put the letter down. "I was told afterward." "You were told." "Yes." He heard the weight in those 2 words, the weight of something told and not seen. Cole looked at the fire. "What does Drake Kane want?" he said. "He wants the land," she said. "He's always wanted the land west of the creek. He's been circling it for years, but what he came here today to do was show me that he knows, that the record exists, and that he has the option of making it public." She looked at Cole directly. "He will offer you a trade. Sell him the west parcel and he stays quiet. Don't sell, and every person in this county knows what the woman you brought in to care for your daughters was once charged with in Cheyenne." Cole was quiet for a long time. Ben appeared in the doorway. Neither of them had heard him coming. His face was the face of a man who had been listening and had confirmed what he had been afraid of since the beginning. "I told you," Ben said. "From day one I told you. We don't know her. We let her in without documentation, and now she's brought this to our door." "She didn't bring anything," Cole said. "She was already here. She brought her history, which is sitting on Drake Kane's horse right now, riding back toward his ranch with everything it needs to ruin ours." Ben's voice was controlled but tight, like something under pressure. "The girls, Cole, Sadie and Lily, you have to think about what this does to them when it gets out." Cole looked at his brother, then at Ruth. "Go to bed, Ben. he said. Cole, go to bed. Ben looked at Ruth, a look that was not hatred, which almost made it harder. It was the look of a man who had been right about something he had hoped not to be right about. He left. The kitchen was very quiet. Cole looked at his hands. I need tonight, he said, to think. I know, Ruth said. I'm not asking you to leave. I know. She picked up the letter from the writing desk, crossed the room, set it in front of him. Margaret left something, she said, in the bottom of this drawer. I found it 2 days ago. I was going to tell you. She paused. Read it when you're ready. And she went upstairs. She did not sleep. At some point in the dark, she heard Cole's boots on the stairs, slow, the way they always were, going up slower than going down. She heard him stop outside her door. He did not knock. He just stood there for a moment, and then he went to his room. She listened to the house. In the morning, Ben would not look at her, which was worse than him looking. Cole came down and spoke to her quietly while she was making the coffee. He said, I've thought about it. She said, all right. He said, I'm not going to sell him the land. She looked at him. He said, and you didn't ask me to. No, she said, I didn't. Good, he said, and poured his coffee. Ben slammed the back door when he went out to work. The girls came down. Lily immediately began explaining a dream that involved horses and a speaking crow. Sadie appeared in the doorway with her journal and looked at Ruth with the attention she used when she was updating her calculations. Ruth set bread on the table. She thought Drake Kane is going to move fast. She thought a man like that doesn't circle. He tests, and then when he's done testing, he comes directly. She thought, I have been in here before, in different rooms, with different walls, and every time I thought there was something worth protecting, and every time I was the thing that put it at risk. She thought, no, stop. The thought is wrong. You are not the risk. You never were the risk. The risk is the man who showed up with cold eyes and a polite voice. The risk is not you. She thought, keep saying that until you believe it. She set the table. That afternoon, she found Lily on the porch doing the complicated, emotional math of a 5-year-old who had sensed something was wrong and didn't know where to put it. She was arranging her wooden animals in a circle and then rearranging them and then sitting back and looking at them like the arrangement would eventually tell her something. Ruth sat down beside her. They sat together on the porch in the October cold. After a while, Lily said, Ezra says Drake Kane is a man with bad arithmetic. Ruth looked at her. He said when a man wants what doesn't belong to him, his arithmetic is always bad. Lily said, he adds up wrong. Ezra's right, Ruth said. Lily rearranged the horse. Are you going to leave? She said. Casual. The way you said something when you had been holding it too long and needed to set it down somewhere. Ruth looked at the east field. Not planning to, she said. Okay, Lily said. Like that settled it. Anne went back to the animals. Ruth thought, I have to protect this. She thought, and the only way to protect this is to not be the thing that breaks it. She thought, which means there is something I have to do that I don't want to do. That evening she went to her room. She was not packing. She told herself she was not packing. She was looking at what she had, which was not much. A dress, the letters in her apron pocket, the shawl, the mismatched boots. She was not packing, except that she put the shawl over her arm and she picked up the letters and she stood at the door. If she left tonight, before Drake Kane had time to do what he was going to do, Cole could say she was a hired woman who didn't work out. He could find someone else, someone with clean records and no Cheyenne courthouse in her history. The girls would be hurt, but they had been hurt before. They would survive it, better hurt now than destroyed later. She opened her door, and Sadie was sitting at the top of the stairs, sitting, not standing, sitting with her back against the wall, and her journal closed in her lap, and her boots flat on the floor, and her arms around her knees, and her face doing absolutely nothing. Ruth stopped. Sadie did not look at her. "You're leaving," Sadie said, not a question. The flat certainty of someone who had been watching the signs accumulate for hours. Ruth said nothing. "I saw you with the shawl," Sadie said. "I saw how you were standing at the window after supper. The women who leave always stand at the window." Ruth looked at the girl on the stairs, 9 years old, in her stocking feet, sitting at the top of the stairs in the dark because she had known, because she always knew, because this child had been trained by loss to read the air for what was coming. "I'm trying to protect the ranch," Ruth said, quietly. "If I stay, there are people who will use what they know about me to hurt your father." "I know," Sadie said. Ruth blinked. "I was listening," Sadie said. "From the hall, I know about the courthouse and the man and the charges that were dropped." She looked at her journal. "I wrote it down." "Sadie, you told Papa the truth," Sadie said, "even when it was hard, even when Ben looked at you like that." She turned the journal over in her hands. "The women who left before, none of them told the truth, not even at the end. They just smiled and said they were sorry, and then they went." Ruth stood very still. "If you go," Sadie said, "you go. I can't stop you. I know that." She looked up, finally. Those eyes, the eyes of someone 40 years older in a 9-year-old face. "But if you go, I will know that telling the truth doesn't matter, because even the ones who told the truth left anyway." The words landed in Ruth somewhere deep, not soft, hard, because they were true, because the thing Sadie was saying was not, "You are hurting me." It was something worse. It was, "You will teach me that truth doesn't protect you," and that lesson, in a child this precise, would calcify into something permanent. Ruth set the shawl down, on the floor, right there on the hallway floor. Sadie looked at the shawl, then at Ruth. "Okay," she said. One word, nothing more. She stood up, smoothed her nightgown, picked up her journal, and walked back to her room. Ruth stood in the hallway for a long time, with the shawl on the floor and the letters in her hand, and the sensation of a decision being made, not by her mind, but by something older. She picked up the shawl, she put it back in her room, and she went downstairs. The next morning, Ezra Finch asked her to come to the barn. Not unusual, except that Ezra did not ask. Ezra simply did. The fact of asking meant something. She followed him. He closed the barn door behind them with the care of someone who wanted the conversation private. He stood with his back to the wall of the stall he had been repairing, and he looked at her with the steady eyes of a man who had been deciding how long to wait and had decided that last night was long enough. "I know Drake Kane," he said, "from before Cole bought this place, from when his father had it." He turned a worn piece of leather in his hands. 19 years ago, Drake Kane came to this valley with a land claim that didn't sit right. He bought parcels on both sides of the creek, using papers from a surveyor in Laramie that I later found out hadn't set foot in this county. He looked at her. He needed witnesses for his filings, legitimate witnesses, people the county knew. He asked me, told me it was a standard land transfer and that the McKenna family had agreed to it and that it was all above board. Ruth waited. "I signed 3 documents," Ezra said. "I signed them because I had no reason not to, and I was trusting in the way young men are trusting before they understand that trust is not a virtue when applied to the wrong person. He paused. Later, I found out the McKenna family had not agreed to anything. They were removed from their land without compensation. The papers I signed as witness were the documents that made it possible. The barn was very quiet. You've been carrying that, Ruth said. For 19 years, he said. Yes. Why haven't you told Cole? Cole wasn't here for it. His father knew pieces, but not the whole. And then his father died, and there was enough to carry without adding mine to it. He turned the leather again, and I told myself it was done, that it was history, that Drake Kane had what he wanted, and he wouldn't need to come back. He looked at her steadily. But he's back, Ezra said, which means he wants more, and which means the documents I signed and the false witness I gave, and all of it is about to become relevant again. He paused. I thought you should know, because I'm going to tell Cole, and when I tell Cole, things are going to move fast, and you're the one who knows about courts and documentation and how those things work. Ruth thought about 13 years of knowing how those things worked. Have you still got the copies, she asked. I kept everything, he said. I don't know why. Maybe because I knew someday I'd have to account for it. He reached behind the work table and pulled out a flat tin box. Inside were folded papers, old, carefully kept. The originals went to the county seat, but these are the copies Drake gave me to keep, which he probably expected I'd have lost by now. Ruth looked at the papers. She thought Drake Kane is about to blackmail this ranch with my history. She thought, and he does not know, that Ezra Finch has been sitting in this barn for 19 years with evidence that Drake Kane built his land holdings on forgery. She thought a man who thinks he holds all the cards has never met a barn full of patient people. She looked at Ezra. You should tell Cole tonight, she said. All of it. I know, he said. I should have told him years ago. You're telling him now, she said. That's what matters. He looked at her for a moment. You're not what I expected, he said. Nobody is, she said, and left him to his work. That night, Cole sat at the kitchen table with Ezra's documents spread in front of him, and his hands very still, and his face doing the thing it did. When he was thinking through something, he would have preferred not to have to think through. Ben sat across from him. For once, he wasn't saying anything. Ruth sat at the end of the table because Cole had asked her to be there, which meant something even if Cole did not say so directly. Ezra sat in his chair near the stove, looking at his hands. He built half his holdings in this valley on false documents, Cole said finally. Yes, Ezra said, and you witnessed the signing. Without knowing what I was signing, yes. Ben was looking at the table, the look of someone revising a position they had been very confident in. If this went to the county seat, Ruth said carefully, and Ezra testified that he was deceived into signing, and if there were other witnesses to the McKenna removal. She paused. Drake Kane's land claims become contestable. The false document becomes the foundation of a fraud case. Cole looked at her. You know how this works, he said. I have been in enough courtrooms, she said, to understand what documents do and what they undo. Ben said he'll come back tomorrow or the day after with whatever he has on Ruth and whatever pressure he can bring. He will, Cole agreed. So what do we do? Cole looked at the documents, then at Ezra, then at Ruth. We don't go to him, he said. We wait. And when he comes, we let him say what he came to say, and then we tell him what we know. Ezra nodded once, slow, like a man who had been waiting a long time to nod at something. The fire was doing its work. Ben said, I owe you an apology. Not to Cole, to Ruth. She looked at him. I've been watching you for the wrong thing, he said, looking for the reason to distrust instead of looking at what was actually there. He looked at his coffee. Sadie likes you, and Sadie doesn't like anyone who isn't worth it. I should have paid attention to that sooner. Ruth said, you were protecting your brother. You said that before. It's still true. He looked at her. It's not an excuse, he said. No, she agreed, but it's a reason. There's a difference. He almost said something else, then he didn't, and that was enough. 3 days later, morning, a knock at the back door. Ruth was at the stove when she heard it. She set down the spoon. She thought, here it is. She thought, all right. She thought, I have been here before, in different rooms, with different stakes, and every single time, the thing I was most afraid of turned out to be something I could stand. She stood up straight. Lily appeared in the kitchen doorway first. She always answered the back door before anyone thought to stop her padding out in her boots and coming back in with whatever she found, human or otherwise. But this time she came back slower, and there was someone behind her, a step behind, like someone who had followed her without meaning to, or had been following the sound of the house for a very long time and had finally arrived at it. A boy, maybe 15, leaned in the way of someone who had been working too hard for too long, his coat too big, his boots worn through at the toe, dark eyes wide with something between fear and relief, and the specific expression of someone who had arrived somewhere and was not yet sure they were allowed to stay. He looked at the kitchen, he looked at the bread, he looked at Ruth, and then his face did something complicated. I wasn't sure if you were still here, he said. His voice caught on the last word, like the sentence had started as one thing and ended as something else entirely. Ruth's hands went still on the counter. She knew those eyes. She had looked into those eyes when they belonged to someone much smaller, someone she had held for 2 years and then been told she would never hold again. Jacob, she said. The word came out like a breath she had been holding for 13 years. The boy made a sound, not quite a word, not quite a sob, something in between. He stepped forward, one step, then another, and then he was in the kitchen doorway, and Ruth was moving and Lily was looking between them with the attentiveness of a 5-year-old who understood that something enormous was happening, even if the words for it had not arrived yet. Ruth reached him. She held him. He was taller than she was now, thin and cold from the road, and his coat smelled like horses and dust and a long way traveled. You're real, he said into her shoulder, his voice muffled. You're actually real. I am, she said. I always was. Outside, the morning was doing what Wyoming mornings did in October, which was arrive cold and certain and indifferent to whatever was happening under the roofs below it. But inside Stone Creek Ranch's kitchen, with the bread on the counter and Lily watching, with her head tilted, and the silence of a house that had just witnessed something it recognized as important, Ruth held her son, and the boy who had been taken from her 13 years ago held her back, and neither of them let go for a long time. Jacob had been on the road for 11 days. He sat at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a cup that Ruth had filled and refilled 3 times because she did not know what else to do with her hands. Lily had fallen asleep against his arm without being asked, as if the body of this stranger she had just met was simply the next available warm thing, and she had made her decision about it immediately. Sadie sat across from him with her journal open and her pencil ready and her face doing nothing and everything at once. Cole stood in the doorway, Ben beside him. Neither of them spoke. Jacob spoke. He spoke the way people spoke who had been carrying something too long and had finally set it down somewhere that could bear the weight. Not fast, not with drama, just the facts the way they had come to him one after another over 15 years. He had been on Drake Kane's property since he was 2 years old. He did not remember coming there. He remembered only ever being there. He had been told by Drake and by every person in Drake's employment that his mother had left him, that she had not wanted him, that she had chosen a different life and he had not been part of it. He had believed this for a long time. He had believed it with the loyalty of a child who needs to believe something terrible about one parent in order to understand why they are where they are. Then he turned 14, and he began to look at things more carefully, because by 14 he understood arithmetic, and the arithmetic of his situation did not add up. His mother had apparently left him, but there was no forwarding address, no letter, no word in any direction from a woman who, by Drake's own account, had been intelligent enough to manage the household accounts for a man running complex financial schemes. He started looking, small ways, the kind of looking that didn't announce itself. He found a file, not all of it, enough. A record of a woman named Lorna Hale who had been tried in Cheyenne in 1863 for accessory to fraud, charges dismissed, and beside the name in Drake Kane's own handwriting in the margin, location to be confirmed. Do not allow contact. He had held that file for a long time. He reached into his coat now and set something on the table, a folded piece of paper, worn at the creases, the kind of paper you carried a very long time before you knew what to do with it. Cole crossed to the table, looked at it. This is Drake's handwriting, he said. Yes. It's a note about your mother. Yes. From 1864. Cole looked at Jacob. He wrote this the year after the trial, while she was building a new life under a new name. Yes, Jacob said again. He kept track of her. He knew where she was. He just didn't tell me. The kitchen was very quiet. Ben said something under his breath. Not a word exactly, just a sound. The sound of a man updating a very significant calculation. Ruth had not spoken since Jacob arrived. She was standing at the counter with her hands flat against the wood. She did not trust herself to move. She thought he was alive. She thought he was 11 days from here. This whole time, she thought Drake Kane knew where I was. He tracked me, and he kept Jacob there and told him. She thought, stop. Do not think about that yet. You can think about that later. Right now, Jacob needs to see your face, not whatever is happening on your face right now. She made it stop. She crossed to the table and sat down across from her son. I want you to know something, she said. Her voice was steady. I did not leave. I thought you were gone. I was told you were gone. And every single day since then. She stopped, cleared her throat. Every day, Jacob looked at her. I know, he said. I know that now. What made you come? He was quiet for a moment. Someone said your name, he said. In town. I was at the feed store and a man was talking about the Tanner Ranch and the mail order bride who showed up in the wrong boots, and He stopped, looked at his hands. I heard your name, Calloway, and I thought it was a coincidence, but I didn't sleep that night, and the next morning I took the horse, and I didn't go back. Cole said, you stole Drake's horse. Jacob looked at him. Yes, he said, not apologetic, just honest. Cole looked at Ben. Ben looked at the ceiling. All right, Cole said, you can put the horse in the barn. In the morning, Jacob told them everything else, about the land documents, about the things he had seen in 15 years of living on the edge of Drake Kane's operation, about the other families who had been removed from their land without compensation, not just the McKennas that Ezra knew about the way Drake ran his business, which was with the precision of someone who believed he would never be held to account because he had always controlled the accounting. Ezra brought out his tin box. Jacob looked at the papers inside. He recognized some of them. "The surveyor from Laramie," he said. "You know him," Ezra said. "He came to the ranch 3 times, Jacob said. "Drake always sent the workers away before they met, but I was small enough that nobody sent me anywhere." He pointed to a signature. "That's not the surveyor's real signature. I saw him sign his name once. His signature has a specific letter that he always made differently. This is an imitation." Ezra looked at the paper. Cole looked at the paper. Ruth looked at the paper, and then she looked at Jacob. 15 years old, in a borrowed coat, with 11 days of road on him, and a tin box worth of evidence he had been accumulating in his memory since he was 14 years old. She thought I lost 2 years with him. She thought he grew up inside the house of the man who took him. She thought, and he still came. She thought that is not my doing. That is his. Ben said, "We need the sheriff." "The sheriff in this county plays cards with Drake Kane," Cole said. "Then we need to go higher," Ben said. "County seat, state level if it gets there." "It'll take time," Cole said. "We don't have time," Ruth said. Everyone looked at her. "Drake Kane came here 3 days ago to deliver a message. We haven't responded, which means to him we're still deciding. And men like Drake Kane do not wait patiently for people to decide." As if answering her directly that night, the sky to the east turned orange. The fire started in the east field at dusk, low and fast the way a fire started when it had help. Cole smelled it first. He was already moving before Ezra appeared at the bunkhouse door, and Ben came down the stairs in his boots with his shirt still unbuttoned. Dora appeared on the back porch and immediately turned to go back inside, which was the right instinct because she was going for the girls. Ruth was already running. She grabbed buckets at the pump, filled them without watching, moved toward the orange. Her lungs were already burning from the smoke that was coming in at ground level, the kind of smoke that meant dry grass doing exactly what dry grass did. Jacob came beside her. She looked at him. "You don't have to," she said. "I know," he said, and took a bucket. They fought it the way you fought things you could not afford to lose, without strategy at first, just with the primitive urgency of people who had something behind them worth protecting. Cole and Ben dug a brake line with shovels. Ezra worked with wet sacks, methodical as always. Jacob carried water until his shoulders were shaking. Ruth fought the fire. She had fought harder things. Twice the wind shifted and took the fire in a new direction, and twice she repositioned without being told, because she had already calculated which direction the wind would shift based on the way it had been moving all evening. Cole saw her and followed her without asking why, which was how people who trusted each other worked. Sadie was on the back porch with Lily pressed behind her, and the rifle Cole had given her last week held correctly across her body, not raised, just held. Her face was the face of a 9-year-old standing between her sister and the edge of the world. Dora stood behind them with one hand on the door. The fire burned for 2 hours. When it died, it left the east field black and the fence line charred and 3 fence posts gone entirely. But the barn stood, the house stood, the well was intact. Ruth sat on the ground at the edge of the burn line and looked at what was left of the east field and thought nothing for about 90 seconds. Cole sat down beside her. He was covered in ash. He looked at the field. "He said it," he said. "Yes," she said. "He'll say he didn't." Yes. They sat in the smoke and the settling quiet of something that had fought itself out. "What do we do?" Cole said. Ruth looked at the black field. We don't hide, she said. That's what he's counting on. He sets the fire so we're scrambling and afraid and thinking about what we might lose. And then he walks in and offers to let us sell at a fair price, and we're grateful. She turned her head to look at him. We don't scramble. We don't hide. We tell the truth, out loud, in public, before he gets to tell his version. Cole looked at her. You mean a town meeting? I mean something harder than a town meeting, she said. I mean I stand in front of everyone who knows Drake Kane's name, and I say mine, the old one and the new one, and everything in between. Ruth, the only thing he has over me is the threat of people knowing, she said, so we take it away. We tell them first. We tell them all of it, and we give them Ezra's documents and Jacob's account and all of it together, and we let the town decide. Cole was quiet. The field was still smoking in places. He'll come, he said. If we announce it, he'll come. I'm counting on that, she said. 3 days later, people came from across the county, not all at once. Some arrived in wagons, some on horseback, some on foot. The word had spread the way words spread in small places, which was without anyone's precise intention, carried on the ordinary movement of people who talk to other people. Ruth had not called a formal meeting. She had simply told Dora, and Dora had mentioned it to the woman at the dry goods store, and the woman at the dry goods store had a very active relationship with information, and within 24 hours, the preacher had offered the use of the field beside the church, and the school teacher had offered chairs. 50 people came, maybe more. They gathered in the October cold with their coats buttoned and their breath making small clouds, and their faces carrying the careful attention of people who expected to be given something difficult and had come anyway. Ruth stood before them without notes. She had thought about what to say for 2 days and had written several versions and had thrown them all away because what she needed to say was not something that benefited from rehearsal. It benefited from the opposite of rehearsal. She said her name, the old one and the new one, what they meant and how they changed and why. She talked about Cheyenne, about being 19 years old and married to a man who was slick and careful and ran his schemes through her because a friendly woman was a better door than a suspicious man, about staying too long because she was afraid, about leaving anyway. She talked about the courthouse, about Drake Kane looking down at her from the bench, about the charges dismissed, about walking out into the Cheyenne street with nothing and becoming someone new, one road at a time. She talked about what she had been told about Jacob. She talked about Stone Creek Ranch and Cole Tanner and his daughters, about showing up in the wrong boots with nothing to her name. And then she said, 3 weeks ago, a man rode through our gate with the intention of using what I just told you to take something from this family. He wants the land west of the creek that has been in Cole Tanner's family for 30 years, and his plan was to make you afraid of me so that I would leave, and so that Cole would be isolated, and so that the land would eventually come to him. She let that sit. He set fire to our east field 4 days ago, she said. The fire did not reach the barn, but it was meant to. She looked at the crowd. I'm not asking for your protection, she said. I'm telling you the truth, because you deserve to have it, and because the only power a secret has is the silence around it. A man's voice from the back, measured, familiar, a very moving performance. Drake Kane moved through the crowd the way water moved, parting it without effort. He came to the front and stood with his hands in his coat pockets and the expression of a man who had decided ahead of time what this gathering was and had made his peace with it. Miss Calloway is an excellent speaker, he said. She always was. She had a gift for making people believe her. It's how her husband used her. He looked at the crowd. You've heard her story, her version of it, but the documentation says something different. A woman charged with accessory to fraud in Cheyenne in 1863 is now living in the home of a widower with 2 young daughters. I would ask you to think carefully about what that means. The crowd was quiet. Ruth said nothing because she had expected this, and she had decided ahead of time to let him finish. Mr. Kane, Ezra Finch's voice from the side of the gathering, not loud, but clear. Ezra did not project. He simply placed words where they needed to land. I need to say something. Drake turned. Ezra walked forward. He was carrying his tin box. He had not hurried. He had the air of a man who had been waiting for the right moment to say what he was about to say, and who had decided that this was that moment. I signed 3 documents for you in 1857, Ezra said. You told me they were standard land transfers and that the McKenna family had agreed. I believed you. And then the McKenna family was removed from their land, and I found out they hadn't agreed to anything. He looked at the crowd. I've been carrying that for 19 years. I kept copies. He opened the box. He held up the papers. Jacob stepped forward from the side. He was wearing a clean shirt that Ben had given him. He stood straight in the way of someone who was afraid and had decided to stand straight anyway. My name is Jacob Calloway, he said. I'm 15 years old. I've been living on Drake Kane's property since I was 2 years old. He told me my mother left me on purpose. He paused. She didn't. He knew where she was the whole time. He kept me away from her because she knew what he had done, and having her near him was a liability. He looked at Drake. I found the file, the one where you tracked her. I have it. Drake Kane was very still. The crowd was very still. And then, Sadie. Nobody saw her move forward. She was simply suddenly there, at the front of the crowd with her journal under her arm and her boots flat on the ground and her chin at the angle it held. When she had finished calculating and was ready to report the result, she was 9 years old. She looked at Drake Kane. He looked at her, and she said in the voice she used when she was reading something aloud that she wanted everyone to understand clearly. He took her boy and told her he was dead. For 13 years, everything else is noise. The crowd was completely silent, not the silence of people who disagreed, the silence of people who had just had the entire thing reduced to its essential truth by a 9-year-old with a journal and no patience for complexity. Drake Kane looked at Sadie, and Sadie looked back at him, and she did not look away first, not once. She just stood there with her chin up and her journal under her arm and waited for the world to respond to what she had said. From the right side of the crowd, a woman said, I knew the McKenna family. From somewhere behind her, a man, so did I. An older voice. They left the county after that, never came back. It was not a roar, not a mob, not anything loud, just the steady accumulation of people who had been watching a man for many years and had not had the specific piece of information they needed to trust what they had been watching. Now they had it. Sheriff Reeves came from the back of the crowd. He was a large man with quiet authority that had nothing to do with Drake Kane and everything to do with the 20 years he had spent in this county doing the actual work of the law. He had been listening. He had a different expression than the one he usually wore around Drake Kane. He looked at the documents in Ezra's hand. He looked at Jacob. He looked at Drake. Mr. Kane, he said, I'm gonna need you to come with me. Drake turned. On the word of a runaway boy and a woman with a fraud record in Cheyenne. On the documents I'm holding, Ezra said, steady as stone, and on the testimony I'm prepared to give. Drake looked at the sheriff. The sheriff looked back. "I've played cards with you for 8 years," the sheriff said, "and for 8 years I have not asked certain questions. I'm asking them now." He looked at Jacob. "The boy stays here." He looked at Drake. "You come with me." Drake Kane looked at the crowd one more time. He had been doing calculations all his life. Every situation, every conversation, every person in front of him measured for what they would and would not do. He was calculating now, and whatever result he arrived at, it was not the one he had expected. He went with the sheriff, quietly, which was worse than if he had shouted, because it meant he had already accepted the outcome. The crowd dispersed slowly, the way crowds dispersed when they had witnessed something that required time to settle into meaning. Ruth stood in the empty field for a while after everyone had left. Jacob came to stand beside her. Sadie came to stand on her other side. She had closed her journal, which Ruth had come to understand was a sign that the observation was complete. "You didn't need me to stand up," Sadie said. "No," Ruth agreed, "but I wanted to." Ruth looked at her. "I know," she said. Sadie nodded once, satisfied, and walked back toward the wagons where Dora and Lily were waiting with the patience of people who had done their part and were ready for what came next. Jacob watched her go. "Is she always like that?" he said. "Always," Ruth said. He thought about this. "I like her," he said. "She'll put that in the journal." Ruth said, "Is that good?" "It's the best thing." They rode back to Stone Creek Ranch in 2 wagons. Cole drove the first with Dora and the girls. Ben drove the second with Ezra and Jacob, who spent the journey answering Ben's very specific questions about the McKenna land records with the patience of someone who had spent 15 years memorizing things without knowing why until now. Ruth sat beside Cole. They did not speak for most of the road. The October sky was the color of something that had been decided. "He'll contest it," Cole said. "Eventually. He'll get lawyers. It'll go on longer than today." "It will," Ruth agreed. "You ready for that?" She thought about Kansas, about Cheyenne, about 11 days of road and a stagecoach, and arriving with nothing and standing in the yard with her mismatched boots. "I've been getting ready for a long time," she said. He looked at the road. "Good," he said, "because I need you here," which was not a declaration, not a promise, not a large thing said in a large way, just a fact stated the way Cole Tanner stated facts, directly, without decoration. That was how he meant the things he meant most, not with ceremony, just with the plain weight of truth. She looked at the road ahead. "I know," she said. That evening, Stone Creek Ranch had the first dinner that filled every chair. Cole and Ben, Dora, Ezra, who ate, sitting down for the first time since Ruth had arrived. Lily, who had appointed herself in charge of the bread and had passed it to Jacob 4 times already. Sadie, who was writing something in her journal between bites with the focused efficiency of a person who did not allow meals to interrupt documentation. Jacob ate with the attention of someone who had not eaten food like this in a very long time and was going to notice every single thing about it. Ruth moved through the kitchen with the ease of someone who knew where everything was, which she did now. She knew this kitchen the way you knew a place you had stopped just passing through. She set a plate down. She sat. Cole looked around the table. He did not say anything. He did not make a speech or mark the occasion with words because he was not a man who marked things with words. He picked up his fork, started eating, which was the signal, and everyone knew it. And then Lily said, "Jacob, did you know the 3rd stair from the bottom creaks?" "I didn't," Jacob said. "Sadie does it on purpose to warn people." "I do not," Sadie said without looking up from her journal. She does, Lily said, serenely. She did it this morning. I saw her. I was testing the structural integrity, Sadie said. Ben said at 6 in the morning. Sadie put the pencil down, looked at Ben, the look of someone who had a great deal to say and had decided to say none of it. Ezra refilled his coffee. Cole was almost smiling, and Ruth sat at the table of Stone Creek Ranch with her son on her left and a 9-year-old keeping records on her right, and the October dark outside the windows and the feeling of something that had been falling for a very long time having finally found the floor. Not an ending. She knew better than to call it that. There would be lawyers, there would be proceedings, Drake Kane would not go quietly, and the county would take its time, and some people would still say her name with the Cheyenne courthouse attached to it. But she was here, at this table, with her name, her actual name, the one she had built out of what was left after everything else, and she was not getting up from the table. Weeks passed. The county judge reviewed Ezra's documents and Jacob's testimony and opened a formal inquiry into Drake Kane's land acquisitions. It would take time. These things took time. The McKenna family was found in Colorado. Elderly now, they had never forgotten their land. Their eldest daughter cried when the letter arrived. Jacob slept in the bunkhouse with Ben, who taught him the difference between a fence post that needed reinforcing and one that needed replacing, and who did this with more patience than he extended to most things, which Jacob observed without commenting on. Sadie's journal grew by 30 pages in 2 weeks. She would not say what she was writing, but she kept it close. Lily determined that Jacob smelled like the barn, which she ranked just below Peaches on her scale of good smells, which Jacob considered a reasonable placement. Cole repaired the east fence one post at a time with the methodical focus of a man who found meaning in incremental work. Ruth brought him coffee in the afternoon and sometimes stayed to help and sometimes didn't, depending on what the house needed, and he never asked either way, which she had come to understand was his way of saying you decide. She liked that. She liked it very much. One evening in November, with the first snow just beginning on the peaks, Sadie found Ruth in the library, not cleaning, just sitting, looking at the shelf where Margaret's Jane Eyre lived, with its margins full of small, careful notes. Sadie sat in the chair across from her. She opened her journal. She said, "Can I read you something?" Ruth looked at her. "Yes," she said. Sadie read. She had been writing about the last 4 weeks, not as a record, as a story. The woman who arrived with the wrong boots, the man who came to the gate with cold eyes, the fire, the field, the boy who came back. And at the end, she had written, Ruth Calloway came to Stone Creek Ranch with nothing. She stayed with everything, not because she was owed it, because she chose it. That is what staying looks like when it is real. Sadie closed the journal. Ruth sat with that for a moment. "Is that for keeping?" she said. "Yes," Sadie said. "Then I'm glad you wrote it down," Ruth said. "Because you were right. That is what it looks like." Sadie nodded. Once, sharp, the nod she gave when something had been confirmed. Outside the window, the snow was coming in earnest now, the kind that settled and stayed, the kind that covered the black earth of the burned field and made it the same color as everything else, not erased, just resting, waiting for what came next, the way land always waited, patient and certain that spring was a thing that returned. And inside Stone Creek Ranch, the fire in the library grate was burning, with the conviction of something that knows it is needed and would not be going out anytime soon.